Thank you so much for joining us.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Coming all the way from the UK, and now we're going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about this COP30. How many COPs have you been to now?
19, and
19, wow.
Somebody told me, a journalist who obviously has time on planes to add this all up, told me today that if you've done 19, that's a year of your life.
A year of your life at
yeah,
COPs?
So I'm still in shock.
Man, which is your favorite COP?
No, you can't.
You
don't do that. No.
You can't do that. You can't. Yeah.
I'll
it's
upset
like asking
somebody. Yeah, it's like, who's your favourite child?
Favorite child,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Sophie's choice. Sorry.
Belém. There you go.
Belém. There you go. Whichever one you're at now.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us, what are you expecting over the next week? What are the sort of pain points, agreement points? What do you think this one will be known as? Let's say we're looking back in 2 or 3 weeks. What will be the headlines? What will be people saying about Belém COP30?
So just to put my comments in context, so I've been to 19 COPs, but I've been to 19 COPs as an activist, as a UN official, senior UN official, senior World Bank Group official, now with the UK, academic, so I've seen it from all sides, right? Inside the room, outside the room, on the streets. Well, I think that, so for the public at large, I hope that this is in large part the nature COP. You just heard from Bayer. If we don't protect the nature that we have intact, it's just going to affect your food basket everywhere in the world. It's going to affect so much of what we take for granted. It is the resilience upon which we depend. It is the thermostat. It is the sequestration of carbon. It is the protection of the watersheds. And finding ways to invest in that nature is something which is front and center here. So I'll come back to that. The second thing is that what the Brazilians are really trying very hard to do, and it's hard, and we should be grateful to them, is to pivot away from sort of negotiating what we all think we need to do. We've kind of done that for the last 10 years. And how do we accelerate the implementation of all of the things that we've agreed to do? And that requires a different kind of structure of conversation, because it's not negotiators sitting in airless, windowless rooms over the fine points, the commas and the brackets and all of that kind of thing around language. It is eyeball to eyeball, leader to leader, CEO to CEO, civil society leader, indigenous leader, saying, okay, we promised that we were going to do this, how are we going to do it? That's more difficult to convey to the public, but that's what we're all doing here.
So it's the action COP, not the blah blah COP.
Lula calls it the truth COP, which I think is actually right, because we've promised to do lots of things.
Moment of truth.
Yeah, we've committed to do lots of things, so now is like, are we going to do them or not? This is the moment to start doubling down and accelerating the implementation.
And as I mentioned in my conversation with Bill, there's been some criticism of putting this COP in the rainforest. What do you think of that? Do you think it was a good idea, smart idea? What's your sense?
Well, to be fair to President Lula, he said it would be in Belém, in Sharm el-Sheikh, before he'd come back into power. And he has a very specific reason for bringing us all here, which is like, this is where it starts and ends. If we don't protect this, we are all in a very, very bad situation. And you can argue that, okay, well, the air miles flown. But I think unless you've been here, unless you can see it, because I think often in the global north, we think about the Amazon and we think trees, right? You've got to look underneath the trees. You've got to look at the 18 million people that live in the legal Amazon. You've got to look at what their conditions are, what their aspirations are. This is a living ecosystem. This is a living society. And if we don't protect places like this for all of us, then really I don't know what we're doing. So, did it take some people 32 hours to get here? Yeah, fine. 32 hours of your life to try to get a better outcome, I think it's worth it. There you go. Might be the first and last round of applause I get this one.
So right now we're in the leaders summit before
Yeah.
we even get the sort of formal negotiations and truth moments. When we look at some of the promises that countries have made,
Yeah.
It looks like we're talking about only 10% emissions reduction by 2035, when the sort of demands are for 60%. What do you think about that gap? Do you think countries are going to come a bit late and close that gap, or what's your feeling about where we're at in terms of like actual promises, actual reduction of emissions?
Right, so you're referring to the third generation of these nationally determined contributions, these countrywide plans, right? And first of all, this is the third iteration. The third iteration is better than the second. The second was better than the first. So most of these country plans now are the whole of the economy, all gases, and some of them are even sort of basically beginning to be recognisable investment plans, right? So that's good. Now, when you tally them all up, we're not on track for 1.5 degrees. We're not aligned with Paris. And so the question is, what do we need to do to help these countries implement them and go further? And what we're looking for at this World Leaders Summit, and you're hearing this in the dialogue amongst leaders, certainly I heard it today, is, okay, this is what we could do now, and we have to strive to do better. And actually, President Xi Jinping at the General Assembly in September, suggested what the numbers would be for the Chinese nationally determined contribution and said, and we will strive to do better. So, now, in the Paris Agreement, we didn't say we would strive to do better. We said we would produce nationally determined contributions with the highest ambition, right? So we have to keep reminding ourselves, but given that countries are where they are, then the question is, how do you keep supporting them? And take Brazil's NDC. It's a range. It's 60% reduction in emissions up to 67% reduction in emissions. The difference between 60 and 67 is whether they get their regulatory frameworks in place, and mostly they have, and they've now got a new carbon market, etc., all these things that we should be very impressed by, and then they have to attract domestic and international investment into each of the sectors of their economy. And if they do that well, they can hit 67. If that falters, then it's going to be 60. And that's the kind of thing we're discussing at this COP. It's like, how do you make sure the investment is flowing into, a grid which is capable of absorbing more renewable energy? How do you make sure that you've got a flow of investment going into the agriculture sector so that the soils are protected and that the farmers are able to? So we're getting down now into the nitty-gritty of financial regulations, regulations of sectoral targets, and we're getting down into the nitty-gritty then of, and how do we find the money to make sure that we're all resilient, that people are resilient, that nature is resilient, and that infrastructure is resilient? Because if we don't get that right, the impacts of climate, which we're feeling earlier than we expected, are going to be the things that are on the front of newspapers, and those will be the impacts that people feel. So you add it all up, we're not on track. Not on track, got to do better.
So I'm going to give you a chance to brag a little bit, because I think the UK reduction target is the highest. Yeah. Would you like to explain a little bit about the UK?
So the new government, the Labour government, was elected in July 2024. Took the work that had been already underway and prepared by our civil service, but also in the UK, very importantly, we have a statutory obligation to meet net zero. This is enshrined in statute. We have independent statutory bodies that look at our carbon budget and tell the government whether they're on track or not on track. It's independent. It's not party political, and so we have parameters that we have to sort of manage within in order to get to our net zero commitment. And so you take all of that evidence and then you look at it as a government. You say, okay, well, we are going to, how do we manage this? And so we came out with a figure of 81% reduction of emissions over the baseline levels.
By 2035.
By 2035. And that's definitely a stretch target, but doable. But this wasn't sort of, let's just throw a number to the UN. This was worked through in detail. And it depends upon the success of our energy transition, and from that, other things will flow. It is Paris aligned, so it is in line with getting to net zero by 2050. And we came early with it. We came early, so we announced it a year ago in Baku at COP29. One, because it's a new government, we wanted to sort of show the direction of travel. But two, was to put a marker out there for other countries and to help Brazil in particular, as the host of COP30, sort of pull things along. And I think it's had that effect.
I'm really interested. I've been deep at one point in my journalistic career, deep into the debate around nuclear power. Actually, I went deep into it with Oliver Stone. You know who I'm talking about?
The film director.
The film director.
Sounds like a movie.
Yeah, he did a movie. He did a movie about how nuclear power had been unfairly aligned. It was quite weird to hang out with Oliver Stone and talk about nuclear power. But the point is, I'm interested in how reliant the UK is on nuclear in its plans, and how you see the debate shifting on nuclear power, because it's been anathema to some countries, Germany in particular, but also Japan more recently after the Fukushima disaster about 13 years ago or whatever it was.
2011.
2011, exactly. I was there actually. I'm just really interested in where you think the debate is now on nuclear power in terms of renewables. And
so it's definitely shifting, right? And I think societies shift. Societies have innately within them a risk appetite, and it can shift, as Japan's did after Fukushima. And you can see it creeping back now, right? I mean, coal, nuclear. And you've seen that happen in other societies as well. Where we are at the moment, so the UK, nuclear will be a significant part of our energy security future. We've clarified that. We've got investment coming in, and we're investing, especially through Rolls-Royce and others, in a new generation of small modular reactors, in addition to the large nuclear plants that we have. So we've clarified that, and that's there. What I see when I travel around the world as the UK's envoy is that every country is interested in the next generation of nuclear technology, which people are very excited about, small modular reactors, etc. And they're excited about it because they believe that it would be an important part of the mix that they need, in particular to provide reliable, affordable power for data centers and the age of AI. Now, these are countries that have no nuclear past, so they have no civil nuclear power regulatory framework. They've got no laws, they've got no safety, they've got nothing, right? So all of that would have to be built, and then we'd also have to understand, in agreement with the International Atomic Energy Agency, how you would deal with this spread of nuclear civil power in the context of non-proliferation. So there's all kinds of things that have to happen. So when a billionaire or others stand up and tell you, you can have an SMR tomorrow in your backyard, and you can
Oliver Stone.
Yeah, or you can run your data center off it. Not quite, but I think more and more countries are interested in nuclear, and I think nuclear as a clean power is definitely sort of in people's imagination. Of course, the joke always is, right, that it's 20 years away, so it isn't a fast solution. So for those countries that want now reliable power because they want data centers and they don't want to miss out on the AI revolution, for them, really, it is a mixture of renewables and battery and storage that can get them the quickest, cheapest available power now. Yeah.
I don't think we could finish an interview without talking about perhaps the elephant in the room. The United States has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement again.
In the process of.
In the process of. You have Germany, France, the UK all cutting aid budgets. China is the world's biggest emitter. What do you think about the state of the sort of discussion? We're here at COP30, but the Americans are not showing up maybe in as big a way as they would have in the past. What does that mean for the future of this multilateral approach?
So it's one of those moments where two things can be true, right? So we've got emissions from fossil fuels going up, we've got more investment going into renewables. We're emerging out of a world that we've recognised for the last 80 years of institutions and liberal democracy and everything into a new world. There's a power shift moving, it's moving south and east. You've got China in a very they don't like the word dominant, but dominant position in many of the supply chains of renewable energy. They are an electro-state, and the United States seems to want to just be content as a petro-state. The world is shifting, and so all of that is happening at the same time. When I travel around the world, many countries sort of ask me why the United States is shooting itself in its economic foot. And that's interesting to me that's their question, because it's inescapable that the energy transition is A, underway, B, kind of past the tipping point, and C, is going to be the way in which we fuel our future. And clearly the process of electrification is where people start to feel the benefit of all the renewable energy and other forms of energy that are being installed. And that's where the growth is. I mean, in the UK, the green growth, the part of our economy that's green, is growing 3 times faster than the rest of the economy, and you can see that in country after country after country. Why the United States? I mean, I think it's one thing to withdraw, and of course the Paris Agreement was written in a way that it would allow countries to withdraw and rejoin, and the US has done that before. That's a political choice. But the economic choice for most Americans is going to be having access to affordable clean air, clean power, which gives you clean air, which gives you clean water. So I think this is a decision in this moment. Whether this is a long-term decision, whether they come back again at some point in the future, I don't know. But the idea that everything is sort of on hold because one country is withdrawing, I think the evidence here, the evidence in all of the economic press and in the financial press, and the evidence from the communities that will be coming up the river, the indigenous leaders that are coming to Belém over the next few days, is that that one country is the outrider, not the new sort of pivotal centre of this process.
You've said publicly that 1.5 degrees centigrade is still alive but not in good health. Do you think that we will see a change to that target at some point? Do you think that now people have said, okay, well, we don't think we're going to actually reach that at all, so now we've got to move to 2 degrees and adaptation or something? Do you think that the conversation will start to change?
So 1.5 is a scientific concept, right? It is the science that tells us that in order to be able to live with prosperity and with dignity, we need to stop warming at 1.5, right? This is not a politically derived figure. It was politically agreed after Paris. Paris was below 2, right? And then 1.5 came through a scientific report. And I think people are sort of misinterpreting the point of that target. So that is a scientific reality to which we are all committed to trying to get to. Whether we get there in one straight line, or whether we get there by going above and then coming below, or whether we overshoot and have to come back, these are all questions that will come from how much we invest now in curbing emissions and how much we invest in removing emissions from the atmosphere. What the trajectory is to 1.5 is what's at debate, but 1.5 is the scientific target. I think the other thing to note is that every continent, every country is now experiencing the impacts of climate change more profoundly than people thought we would at this juncture in 2025. Some of what countries are going through now was projected for the late 2030s, early 2040s. And we're getting to the point where we've gone past tipping points, natural tipping points. And at that point, we don't quite know how things will go. And so the danger is, it's like, okay, well, 1.5, we're going to miss it. So, let's just do other things and then just sort of hunker down, and we'll be all right. This is a profound misunderstanding of what is going on in communities around the world and in countries around the world. And every life is equal. We, the peoples in the United Nations. So we can't, the biggest mistake I think you can make as a climate activist, or as anybody who's following this, or even somebody just sitting at home watching, is to think that it's just a number. The difference between 1.5 and 2 is the disappearance of certain cultures. the opportunity for certain communities, the existence and the health and well-being of a generation of children. This isn't just a number. I was schooled on this before Paris. I was sitting there as a World Bank employee, and I was like, with my spreadsheets, and like, what's this going to cost, and what's that going to cost, and I got lost in it. And I was sat down by one indigenous leader and another leader, a lawyer for least developed countries, and they said, Rachel, you've got to just come back down, take a breath. These are people's lives, people's livelihoods, and the entire dependence of certain cultures and the ability for them to exist is not just a number. So it's a scientific fact, it is a target, it is a political process, but it's people's lives.
I think very well said. There's been a lot of talk, and there's a lot of discussion around Brazil's tropical forest forever facility. Yeah. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that is and what we can expect and why the UK didn't put any money into it
yet. So I think the UK is looking at investing in the TFFF. Weren't able to do it now, in conversations internally and then with other partners about what the future might hold. But what's happened over the last 2 days is that we've got a commitment of north of like 6 billion. I mean, I don't know what the considerable amount that the Germans announced today that they would put a considerable amount in, and because their Germany considerable is considerable. So I don't know. Let's say that that's $1 billion just for for rounding up purposes. So we're probably at about $6.5–7 billion committed into a fund, and this is what's different about it. This is not aid. This is not a donation. This is not a grant. This is not a bucket that's being passed around. This is an investment in a fund which will have. How
does it work? What does it mean?
So other kinds of funds, all kinds of entities.
Pension funds.
Yeah, so private money, basically. And that private money will get a commercial return. So the fund will then invest in the markets, and the proceeds of what the markets, how the market...
Public
fund,
markets, equities, stock market.
It's just going to invest in across the world, global, right? So the revenues from that will then get sent to forest countries in tropical zones where the governments are able to guarantee that they will meet certain levels of integrity in the management of their forests. And 20% of the proceeds will go directly to indigenous peoples and local communities. So two things. One, if this works, this could work for other sort of public goods. It could work for oceans and seagrasses and other things. Two, it is perpetual, it is sustainable because the fund keeps investing, the fund keeps producing a return, the returns keep going to the countries.
And it's run by professional...
And it will be run by professional
managers.
Fund managers. And it's backstopped by the World Bank Group, which is a AAA multilateral development bank. So what we're doing is breaking through the idea that this is nice to have and that we just need to give handouts.
And it's charity.
Yeah, this is need to have. We need these forests to be preserved, and finding ways to capture all of the private capital that needs a return but would love to be involved in saving the forest because that's your food basket, that's your price of a cup of coffee, that's your watershed, that's your food security. This brings it all together. So we've spent a lot of time the last 2 years, lots of technical assistance, lots of helping the Brazilians talk to the markets, using London and the City of London as a place to have this conversation. So we're deeply committed to this fund working. The timing was kind of awkward with our own budget this year.
Yeah, your budget is a bit awkward. That's true.
But the other thing that's important about this is that investing in this fund, in that junior tranche, is Indonesia, is Brazil, and maybe China. And that's important because...
And Germany, considerably.
Yes, and Germany and Norway. But the point being, it's not just the developed countries, right? So it's middle-income countries as well. And inside the COP, we always, it's always, oh, the rich countries have to transfer funds down to other countries. This breaks that model a little bit.
Which I think is a very good thing.
Yeah.
So you have been in negotiations, though, right? Yeah. You're not the lead negotiator anymore, but you've been a negotiator. So what is it like inside those rooms? What's the sort of mood? What do you think? What do we expect next week? Does it ever get heated? Do people throw things and yell at each other? Does it get very, very tense? What's it like? Just tell us a little bit about it.
All of the above.
Yeah.
The first week is technical processes of, looking at all of the things that have happened in the year up to that point, receiving reports, registering them, approving them, and also there's always, in recent years we've had a fight over the actual agenda. What are we actually going to talk about? And then you have a sort of middle weekend where the presidency starts to take over. So in the first week, these are technical bodies. Then the presidency starts to take over, and then the presidency exerts its influence on the process. And in the second week, you then start negotiating on what are we agreeing, what are we, what's new that needs to be agreed, what language are we going to use to sort of describe everything that has happened. And this is a place where you can start referencing the things that are happening outside the negotiations, so the TFFF and all these other things. And that will be then the document that comes out of the COP, sort of the political chapeau, the political hat over all of these other technical things. And it can get very intense. And you've
personal, people start getting nasty.
Occasionally. You get there are seasoned negotiators. There are people who've negotiated for the last 30 years. And then you've got, obviously, new people tracking through. It's very difficult for small island states and least developed countries. They have, negotiations are going on in multiple rooms at the same time. How, if you're a country where your finance ministry has like 4 officials, how do you cope with that, right? So, it's so, and it goes, and we've got this bad habit in recent years of going over time. Yeah. And so last year in Baku, I think my minister had like 6-7 hours sleep in 40 hours. So I wouldn't recommend it as part of a health regime. And sometimes we're arguing over colons and semi-sentences and things like that. But actually at the heart of it, what we're really doing is arguing about the quality of partnership between countries to get this done. And so the issues that are the most difficult are the issues of the means of implementation. And that comes normally down to finance in the last few years.
Who's going to pay?
Who's going to pay and how?
And how.
Yeah. And then I think also...
And how much?
Yeah, and then 2 years ago in Dubai, for the first time, famously, we referenced that fossil fuels had something to do with this. And we agreed language that said that we would transition away from fossil fuels. One of the things to look for here is whether or not we will agree how to actually transition away. Because if you're Angola, your transition away is going to be different from Nigeria, is going to be different from the UK, is going to be different from... And we didn't say anything about the how. We just sort of said you have to transition away. And there's a call from a number of countries to really sort of put some not parameters, but some sort of guardrails around that, right? I was just in the Energy Leaders Summit now, and it was very interesting to listen to Guyana, Suriname, Namibia, countries that have just recently found huge oil fields and gas fields, right? And so they're like, look, how are we going to manage our transition? How are you going to help us manage our transition? Are you going to say that we can't exploit any of this? So these are complicated questions. And then, of course, you've got the fact that within the G7, we haven't made the progress that we thought we'd make 10 years ago in transitioning away ourselves, right? Partly that was to do with energy security after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Of course, in the UK, that's driven us even harder into a renewable energy direction, but not all countries have done the same. So I think you'll see a conversation here about what kind of process do we have about how to manage that transition away.
Rachel, Kyte, thank you so much. Really interesting.